public hearing for the committee's inquiry into the Vegetation Management Framework Amendment Bill 2013. And I thank everyone who's phoned in and for those MPs who are here in person today. My name is David Gibson. I'm the member for Gympie and chair of the committee. The other committee members we have here is Mr Michael Hart, the member for Burleigh, Mr Seth Holswich, the member for Pine Rivers. We're expecting Mr Rob Catter, member for Mount Isa, to come in via telephone. We have Mr Bruce Young, member for Keppel, via telephone. And we have Ms Jackie Tradd, member for South Brisbane, who's replacing Tim Mulheron, the deputy chair, who is a member for Mackay, and she's here in person. The committee is a committee of the Queensland Parliament and as such represents the Parliament. It is an all-party committee which adopts a non-partisan approaches to its hearings. The hearings today form part of the committee's examination of the Vegetation Management Framework Amendment Bill 2013. The Parliament of Queensland Act requires the committee to examine the bill to consider the policy effect given by the bill and the application of fundamental legislative principles. Now, gentlemen, we have you on the phone for the next hour if we need it, but we don't need to take that full amount of time. What we'll do, then we'll have a break, and then we'll form another telephone conference for other groups that are coming through. Although the committee is not swearing in witnesses, I remind all witnesses that this hearing is a formal process of the Parliament, and as such, any person intentionally misleading the committee is conducting a serious offence. For the benefit of Hansard, I would ask all witnesses if you could identify yourself when you first speak, particularly from a teleconference perspective, that's important, to speak clearly and at a reasonable pace, and if you can maintain a good volume, that will assist us at this end. It is the committee's intention that a transcript of the hearing be published. Before we commence, I'd ask that all mobile phones and pages be switched off or put on to silent mode. What I'd now like to do, gentlemen, is if we could, just for, I guess, ease, so not everyone's talking over each other, we might just move through in the following order. If each of you could just state your name, and I'd like to give you the opportunity for, let's say, about a 2-minute opening statement. We do have your submissions here, so you don't feel the need to restate those, but perhaps some of the key points that you feel this bill does or does not address would be of benefit. So if we go through in the following order, Mr Peter Very, then followed by Mr Angus Ryrie, Mr Michael Price and Mr Barry Hall. So Peter, if we could commence with you.
Yeah, thanks. Peter Very is my name. I'm from Mossman. I'm a cattleman as well as a cane grower. I'm a member of Ag Force and also a member of cane growers. You virtually want me to just pick out a topic or something of my submission?
If you could, Peter, just give us a couple of minutes of just those key points that you feel are important.
A couple of the key points, I've listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Predominantly what I could make out of what I could gather. The area planning, as you know, that there's a big difference in the state of Queensland. And the AMPs, I presume, are going to be on a district basis. And as it says in my explanatory notes there, that I would like to see that it's not just run by bureaucrats, that there's a fair assessment of other people that can look into it. The clearing applications, the understanding of a new clearing proposal of high valued agricultural section under clearing in section 22. I take it that's saying that higher agricultural land has got to have irrigation proposals for its use. Well, in the tropics we don't need irrigation, so I would hope that our lands would be also looked at under that regime. The mapping framework in the lock-in thing for non-ostensible vegetation as category X. The only problem I have with, well, I think I have of that is, does it include blocks that don't have a PMOV that are currently shaded in white, and will they be category X? And the other question that I had there was what will happen to areas in green that are mapped incorrectly in the case of my property, will they be locked in or will they be corrected first? The main thing that I want to talk about would be the terminology of the vegetation, where we have high values and endangered regrowths. Regrowth, as you would rightfully know, in our country, nothing grows underneath it. And like I've stated, it takes a long time before all that sort of country dies off. Regrowth is regrowth as far as I'm concerned, and having all these things like 70% height and coverage and what have you not, which is currently under the vegetation, doesn't really do any good. What I would like to add to that submission of mine of regrowth, if it's all possible, is regrowth areas classified as remnant, not of concern, shaded in green on the current maps, should be made into Category X under the mapping framework as the lock-in. Then I think that would also help landowners get something back. The production of our land would be able to be increased, and where necessary, where probably some of that shaded area might be too high, too big a slopes, maybe it can, the landowner will utilise that for future carbon credits. At the moment, that land has been locked up of ours. It's been devaluated as far as I'm concerned. Rates and insurance and duty of cares all have to be taken into consideration. And the community has enjoyed a vegetation management at no cost but at our cost.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter, for that. We'll be coming back to all members with some questions.
Yep.
Might now move to Angus. Would you like to give us a potted summary of your key points of concern?
Yeah, certainly. I'd have to say from the outset, as a freehold landholder, I have paid for the timber on my country in the process of freeholding it. If the government wishes to impose restrictions on that asset, then they must compensate me. Now, to date, that hasn't happened. Second point I'll make, this is my opinion, it is pointless attempting to change the vegetation legislation without reorganising and redirecting the department and staff. The department is more focused on penalising and hindering landholders than promoting and assisting primary production. And as I understood it, the department was there to assist primary producers. I am a stock owner, a landholder. I have a very deep affinity with both my stock and land, and I endeavour to maintain both in the best of health. My conscious and financial future depend on that fact, and as such, my opinion should be weighted. Now, I stress weighted. In the past, it strikes me that minority groups that squeal and wave banners are paid far more attention than primary producers such as myself that have a vested interest in this process. I'll just go through some of the points. The overly complex process to obtain. The department needs to recognise that the thickening, which is a natural process of Gidgee and Brigalow on the Downs, that's in this Western Queensland country. It's quite a problem. To date, it's been a hell of a job to get that recognised, mainly because of the classification of endangered. Secondly, the time taken to obtain a permit, a development permit or a fodder permit. Now, back in the 2001 to about 2004, I had a mulga block northwest of Charleville. And some of that harder mulga country, fodder harvesting is an ongoing process. And when it takes up to 4 months to get a fodder permit, that's just not acceptable. Some people were in dire straits in the early days with this process, and I think a lot of the departmental staff
It's Rob Cattersby.
Thank you very much, Rob. We've just started without you, and we're just hearing the opening submission now from Angus. Please continue, Angus.
Yeah, right. Anyway, I'll just make the point that these applications have to be expedited. Also, development permits on that lower Langloh country, which I'm conversant with, and I still have country down there. Surrounding neighbours all had a similar thing of 4 to 6 months for permits. Now, that's just not acceptable. The third point, the length of time to utilise a permit, that needs to be extended to 10 years. At the moment, 5 years. It doesn't allow for very wet years and drought years. That'll throw your routine maintenance program clean out the window. As an example, Mount Pleasant, a place that I've got east of Tambo, we try and control regrowth, if you like. We do about 2,000 acres a year. That's reverse pulling. The last 3 summers have been excellent, which was great. But what that's done is thrown our blessed control program clean out the window, because the regrowth that we had controlled is now basically the same height as some of the old regrowth. So it's absolutely paramount that permit time be extended to 10 years. Incorrect mapping. We had a lot of problems with pre-maps. The department didn't seem to be able to differentiate between regrowth and virgin timber. The other problem was the department was incorrectly identifying timber species. They were getting Balar mixed up with lancewood, which anyone that is from the land will know they're two completely different timbers. They were wrongly classifying ironbark as endangered. So that begs the question there about the competency of some of the staff.
Excellent. Angus, thank you for that. We might now move on to Michael.
Yes, right.
Yes, Michael Price. Thank you for inviting my comments on vegetation management, and I commend you for your proposed changes. I hope and trust that the necessary code changes to achieve a viable, sustainable and equitable vegetation management regime will be delivered. It's vital, in my opinion, that those code changes come through so that there can be some real change. The most crucial factor to be recognised in this debate is the dynamics of woody vegetation within many ecosystems. Seedling recruitment and growth in the better seasons is phenomenal. Land that was described by surveyors in 1928 as a gidgee forest, generally fairly well grassed, is now an extremely dense thicket, with pasture reduced to non-existent in some areas after good gidgee seedling recruitment in the 1950s, 70s and again in these last good seasons we've had. This is not a healthy or pristine environment. Tree density definitely needs to be managed, and if the prolific germination and growth are accounted for, as we must account for them, we need to be able to thin many ecosystems to wider spacing than what they would have been naturally. Because they will be thicker than natural again in a few short years, we need economical ways of thinning to keep our pasture healthy and improve production. If tree spacings were thinned to 40 metres between small groups of mature and immature trees, we would be addressing everyone's concerns. With the 40-metre spacings between groups, as well as all of the very small seedlings that survive the thinning treatment, the integrity of the forest would be guaranteed, and also at 40 metres, the thinning could be carried out economically, and the pasture would receive enough sunlight and soil space to regenerate, especially with the protection provided by the tree debris from the thinning operation. Broad-scale clearing is still my preferred option, but I don't think that is likely to happen. A thinning regime that allows us resolution. I've got a few figures on tree densities and one thing and another. But on that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Can I now ask Barry if you could say a few words?
Barry Hoare. I'm a 38-year-old beef cattle grazier, and I operate 4 different types of tenure. Whilst I believe that this bill is tremendously good for landholders in regard to vegetation management laws, I admit to not fully understanding the whole bill, as I am a lay person. For the benefit of these new laws to be fully realised, a negative culture that is within the former DNR that has evolved over 2 decades of green sentiment has to be brought back to normality. A great amount of effort will be required for this idealism to be reduced or removed. Without this culture being changed, however, tangible benefits of this legislation won't be allowed to progress. To illustrate this further, in the time I spent on the Capricorn-Dawson Vegetation Management Committee as a river catchment representative, I noticed a general feeling of resignation from industry representatives and also, surprisingly, scientific advisories to the panels. To some more specific points, I believe there should be recognition of the term virgin, that is, for forest, scrub, rainforest, etc., which is defined as being separate from a remnant. This is extremely important going forward, I believe, as prior to the year 2000, there was no remnant. In anyone's vocabulary, there was just virgin and regrowth. This has to be looked at in the longer term view and beyond this term of government. PMAVs should be retained to allow for continuity between different forms of legislation into the future. It provides certainty, and with certainty comes investment and a feeling of ownership over their developed land. There should be a clear path for the implementation for the legislation for both the department staff and landholders who can get on and improve agricultural productivity in both short and long terms. However, the costs involved in obtaining a certified PMAV are prohibitive. Self-assessable codes are preferable in my opinion. The codes themselves need to be descriptive enough to ensure landholders do not inadvertently clear vegetation illegally. In other words, have definitions that are very clear. A review of this legislation should be undertaken within a time frame of no more than 2 years to ensure refinements that are required to the legislation are enacted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry, and I appreciate that as well. Gentlemen, what we may do now, and for my 2 colleagues who are on the teleconference, we'll ask you a series of questions. We'll state who they are, and if we can direct them to an individual, that will probably make it easier, just allowing for the teleconference type mode. But if it's a general question, the first person who wants to weigh into it, just if you could state your name. And Rob, for you and Bruce, if you wish to chime in at any point, just speak up, and we'll obviously default to you guys for a question as well.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Can I just start with the questioning, and I'd like to pick up on the point that, Michael, you made with regard to the spacing of 40 metres between the groups of the trees. I'm curious as to how you've come to that determination. Is that from a practical perspective, enabling machinery to get around, or is there some science that you've come across that determines that 40 metres is a good, a good sizing?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Yes, two reasons. It certainly is a width that could be economically perform the operation. The other is the trees, and that will bounce back. And if you're not careful, you can spend a lot of money thinning to very narrow widths, and your trees are just going to, that you've left, are going to gain and grow rather than the past you've been able to utilise that space. At least with 40 metres, you've got room for sunlight, soil space, and the pastures can regenerate. And like I say, when we treat that to 40 metres, in some sums I worked on a 5% survival rate within that 40 metres, and I'd just like to point out that that would be an extremely, extremely effective kill, if I could use that word. 30% would be more than likely. So even though you might treat to 40 metres, you're still going to have young seedlings survive over that total width.
Thank you very much. Other committee members, questions? Michael?
Gentlemen, can you give us some details about your issues with the mapping system? It's Michael Hart from Burleigh. Just with regard, I think one of you gentlemen said that a particular property was identified incorrectly in the mapping. Do you think that this is an issue with...
Yeah, I can't hear.
Okay, sorry, we might... if you talk into the mic, Michael, it might help.
Talking to that?
Yeah, they'll hear it. It'll come through.
Gentlemen, just with regard to the mapping situation, can you explain to us what your issues are with the maps? Have you got any specific instances of things that you've seen in the present mapping system that might be...
Okay, I'll just repeat his question. It's to do... He's asking with regards to the mapping system, if you could provide us with any examples of your concerns or frustrations with the current mapping system. It's an open question to anybody.
Barry Hall. I know from my experience, I spent 2.5 years on the Vegetation Management Committee for the area west of Rockhampton, and I had an in-depth knowledge of ridiculous things, Lansford being classified as a brigalow, river blue gums getting mistaken for blackbutt, trees that have, got damaged from any number of reasons being identified for essential habitat, being argued as being possums habitat. It got on bordering on the point of being ridiculous.
Thank you, Barry. Anyone else like to make a comment?
Peter Verrill here.
Peter?
Look, I have that problem with some of the mapping on my place. It is even incorrect because there's some clearing done there and they've got it shaded in under the green. And what concerns me is if we're going in on this new lock-in business, will that be locked in as a green thing, where it's not, it's clear. And the other thing, I agree with some of the other gentlemen, I know they're not in the wet tropics like I am, but some of the species of trees that we have up here, I don't think some of these people really know. I look for argument's sake, I look at my neighbour's property, he's got the same coloured trees as what I've got overall, and yet he's in the white and I'm in the green. And then you can look across to the heavy rainforest that's never been cleaned, it's a different colour again. So, this has got to be sorted out somehow.
There's scaling issues there, Doug?
Gentlemen, the further question was, were there any issues with regards to the scaling on the maps that are used?
Yeah, there's no set pattern.
Sorry,
there's no set pattern. I actually did some consultancy for about 4 years, redoing people's maps and stuff, and there's some of the mapping you got, and what went from 1 to 10,000, some of it went right out to almost 1 to, 250,000, and getting it down on on-ground knowledge using GPSs was almost impossible. And the onus was always back on the landholder to get it right. If he got it wrong, he was the one that had to bear the brunt.
Any other comments from any of the other gentlemen with regards to mapping?
Yes, Angus, here, Tambo. I just make the point that a lot of the so-called mapping, I requested an on-property inspection. That was denied. This mapping is done, obviously, in an office. In the case of one paddock on Mount Pleasant, country that had been had a chain over it on 3 occasions was deemed to be virgin. And I had a hell of a job convincing the department that they were wrong. There's just got to be more on-property inspections, and people that come out should know what they're talking about. One character came out to a neighbour and was saying he had a good body of grass, and for God's sake it was spinifex.
Okay. Angus, can I ask, how did you put forward your case to the department and get them to reassess and make changes?
Basically by just insisting that I have a on-property inspection. In the end, they didn't do that, and they amended the pre-map to what I'd asked for.
So they amended it without an on-property inspection, just based on the information you had provided to them?
That's correct, but bear in mind it didn't happen in 5 minutes.
I'm sure. Thank you, Angus. I might ask the member for South Brisbane if she'd like to pose a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me, gentlemen?
Yes.
I'm interested, Mr. Hoare, I think you said that you had 4 different types of lease arrangements. I'm wondering if you or any of the other gentlemen on the line would like to talk about the distinction being drawn between leasehold and freehold in this bill.
Well, Barry Hoare speaking. I operate some freehold, some camp and water reserve, some state forest lease, and a big section of grazing homestead perpetual lease.
Yep.
When the initial laws come in 2000, I applied, put in an application on leasehold land, grazing homestead perpetual lease, and the rest of my neighbours here were freehold. They had their permits within 4 months. It took me 3.5 years to get my permit, and I was given 2 years to enact the permit. It took 20 months of those 2 years for the State Forest Department to harvest usable timber out of it that I had no drama with it in the initial agreement. I thought it was a good idea to remove any decent timber. I had no objection to it, but I was given 4 months out of 7 years, 6 years, sorry, to do my tree clearing, and it was very frustrating.
Other examples from any other gentlemen?
Michael Price. Yes, I had applied for a complex PMAV. Complex PMAV meaning that instead of just a straight lock-in, there were obvious problems with the mapping and that I needed inspection and change. And I did eventually get an on-ground inspection and change, but yeah, it was certainly in over 2 years, so it certainly has been some long time spans, and so I agree with Barry. I think we certainly are entitled to more time to perform our permits after government, and that can take so long to issue them.
Is there anyone else on leasehold or has leasehold land there that they may wish to share their views with the committee?
That's Michael Price. That was leasehold.
That was leasehold? Okay, thank you, Michael. Angus and Peter, you're both freehold. Do you have any?
Freehold.
Freehold.
Okay, thank you for that. Rob and Bruce, either of you two like to ask a question at this stage?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. It's Rob Catter here, member for Mount Isa. I saw on the submissions, Barry, you were talking about reduction in weeds and feral animals.
Yep.
In areas of remnant vegetation. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
We operate two cattle properties. One's basically a breeder block, and then we've got another one located on the Dawson River to the east of us, and it's basically background value-added property. On it is a section of remnant brigalow softwood scrub. It's right next to a big lagoon. Obviously, I cando anything with it. It's only probably 50 acres, I would say. It is rife with rubber vine, lantana, you name it, it is in there. Parthenium, everything known to man. And any chemical that I want to use is going to inhibit that, basically. Like, any chemical you can think of is going to kill some of the remnant vegetation there. And it's getting worse by the year, and 2 floods have gone through it over the last 2 years. And it's brought up, even more. And it's very frustrating. You can't get cattle out of it. It's a harborance for pigs and dingoes. Very, very frustrating.
Does anyone else have any examples with regards to weeds and feral animals?
Yes, Peter Verai. I'm growing sugarcane as well as cattle up on that rainforest high country, and I've had to ring lock virtually all my cane to keep your feral pigs out. I've engaged professional hunters to control pigs. They can be a very costly program, especially in sugarcane, as you could appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard. I like my fauna and flora like probably every other person does, but unfortunately I've had to ring lock it to try and control predominantly feral pigs, so that makes a big handicap for corridors and anything like that of other animals. And up here in the north, these pigs, they're getting worse. And as far as pastures go, well, I don't even bother disking anymore. I let them fellas do the job and then throw the seed out, and that seems to be doing a bit better. Yes, I agree with the other speakers. Weeds and what have you not, you know, it's an ongoing thing.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. Angus and Michael, do you have any comments?
David, it's Bruce Young.
Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
I just wanted to acknowledge Peter's statement earlier in and around there's no irrigation required for his high ag land. I think that we need to make note of that.
No, that's a fair point. Thank you. Jackie has another question here, gentlemen.
Mr. Ari and Mr. Hoare, I think you both mentioned that law changes are one thing, the cultural practices of the department are another. I'm just wondering if you can both expand on that. What are your particular criticisms in relation to the department? I've heard that perhaps some of them don't actually understand a lot of the vegetation that they're trying to categorise, that probably there aren't enough on the ground in order to do some of the necessary field work for the mapping exercises. What are some of the other issues you have with the department?
Angus here. I'd have to say experience and attitude are the two things that come to mind with departmental staff. My experience is a lot of staff that we do eventually get out, bear in mind I'm halfway between Longreach and Charleville, that we do get out here are very inexperienced. Some of them, just out of university. They've got a head full of theory and basically no practical knowledge. And with that comes mistakes, as I say in my submission. They get below mixed up with landscape. They start categorising ironbark as endangered. Another character with these spinifex buffalo. And these simple mistakes initially create major headaches down the track when it comes to categories for your regrowth. So yes, it's experience is a big thing, and having competent people do these inspections.
Any other comments from any of the other gentlemen?
Peter Verrill here. Early when the Vegetation Management Act was implemented, I was probably one of the very few guys that was lucky enough to have a mapping adjustment done, which was sent to me as a legal document. They saw fit to take, and we had spent some time doing it with government department people, and they probably gave us 90% so out what we asked for, which was great to a degree. But without further ado down the track and reminding, you're not got all the money in the world to go and clear stuff and whatever you're not, I had to put it in place so when I could get machinery and what have you not. But anyhow, by the time I got round to wanting to do it, they'd reversed it back into the green again. So, I agree with some of these blokes talking, and it becomes very frustrating, very stressful for us growers. Look, we're flat out working our properties and trying to do the right thing. We don't need this heartache. And some of these things, one of those things with the department I went on with for 4 years, I don't need that anymore. Not at 65 years of age, that's for sure.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments?
Yeah, Barry Hall. Just in relevance to the question before about departmental staff, I'll just give you two quick examples. The bloke that we had here assessing one application I had early in the piece basically comes, and he freely admitted, he comes straight from the valuations department in Brisbane, was transferred to Rockhampton. They found no place for him, so they put him in as a vegetation management officer straight away. He came out here within 1 week of his job with absolutely no training. He didn't know what soils were, he didn't know what grass types were, he didn't know what the veg types he was looking at was. The second example was when I was on the Vegetation Management Committee and trying to bring these new laws in with some relevance 12 years ago, the bloke that was put on our committee from the Environmental Protection Agency was actually a vet. He had no training in vegetation or land types at all, and freely admitted it.
Can I ask?
He was on the committee as for scientific opinion. He had absolutely no scientific knowledge at all.
Barry, can I just ask, was there any movement to perhaps, in recognition that his skill set was not ideal, that perhaps someone else would have come onto that committee? Was there any discussion at all?
Well, to put it in simple terms, I put in a formal complaint.
Okay.
Because they had two very, very good people, one from the Lands Department, one from the DPI. They were very, very good with their knowledge. And as soon as I spoke against this chap, I wasn't allowed to access to the minister at the time, and I was supposed to represent the committee to the Ministerial Advisory Committee, and I was removed.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Hall, can I just ask, was this a departmental officer or a departmental nominee, the vet?
He was on the committee representing the Environmental Protection Agency in a
official
specific
capacity,
role. He was to advise us exactly what tree types were, and he had about 10 books with him all the times, and he was looking them up. It was annoying.
The good thing is he had 10 books with him. Member for Pine Rivers, would you care to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just direct my question to Angus. Yes. You talked about the length of time that it takes to obtain an approval or permit. I think you said 4 to 6 months. I guess a twofold question. What's the tangible negative impacts on you of it taking that long, and what would be a more acceptable time frame to your mind?
Firstly, with fodder permits, this is from Mulga country. That should have priority over any other application, mainly because of the fact that stock are dependent on Mulga. See, what majority of people don't realise is that in the southwest, there's some very, very, very hard Mulga country. In other words, it grows very little grass, and that's basically no use as far as grazing goes, unless you get a really top season. So your stock are reliant on the leaf of the mulga tree. Now that mulga tree, it needs to be pushed over once the leaf, closest leaf to the ground gets above 10 feet. A beast can't even reach it, even then it's too high. So you need to push those older trees over. And in doing that starts young mulga seedlings, and they come up like hairs on a cat's back. Once you've got those young seedlings coming up, well, then you've solved the problem. But in some cases, in a severe drought, those mulga seedlings will die, and people are then dependent, going back to pushing the mature trees. Now, if you've got a program which in harder mulga country, some of it's almost year-round activity, you can't afford to wait. In other words, I know when I had Bay Cool, northwest of Charleville there, as soon as you started the tractor, cattle would just appear out of the scrub from everywhere. And stock are dependent on that fresh leaf for survival. So what I'm saying, if there should be a maximum period, if you like, in days for approval for a fodder permit. A development permit, that's a different kettle of fish. But the staff don't go using the excuse of silly little things such as the GPS coordinates are 1 point out, or some so-and-so's on holiday, or there aren't enough staff, or whatever. But I get back to the point with fodder permits, that must be a priority.
So, Angus, if I can just pick up on that, you would be of the view that with regards to the fodder, specifically with regards to the, to fodder permits, if they were self-assessable, whereby, the landholder could make that, within specified terms, they were able to make that decision, you believe that would be a timely response?
100%, I agree with that, because the bloke that owns the property, he's the best judge of what the situation is. They're not worried about going on holidays next week or whatever. They're worried about the welfare of their stock.
Okay.
And so long as the guidelines are there, there's no problem. And that would be the preferred option, 100% self-assessable.
And Angus, just for the benefit of the committee, and I appreciate, it'll depend on conditions, but how long from from seedling to when the leaf is, at that point where it's out of the reach of the cattle, what sort of time frame are we looking at there? Is that something that occurs fairly quickly, or does it take an extensive period of time to reach that height?
No, that takes a while. If you put the chain over country, your seedlings given, depending on what sort of rain you get, etc., that you'll normally have evidence of seedlings appearing within 12 months, and they, depending on, once again, the seasons, if you get a run of good seasons, well, your seedlings are up and going, and your stock can access the leaf. But I'd have to say you'd be looking at 12, 15 years, I suppose, before that leaf would get beyond the reach of most stock.
Okay, thank you for that. Bruce and Rob, any questions from you?
You going to go, Rob?
No, you're right, Bruce.
I agree. I have a bit of a history with feeding that mulga, and he's right on the money there. So we've just got to acknowledge that. I think that there's some good points in there.
Okay, excellent.
Especially in and around drought, Dave. When drought happens, you just can't sit on 4 months for a permit. Like, that is ludicrous. I can't believe it.
Yeah, no, fair point, and taken. Michael has another question, but we might just move the our little teleconference unit towards him. So just bear with us a moment.
Gentlemen, can you hear me this time?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
With regard to the self-assessed codes, is there anything else that the government should be looking to add to those self-assessed codes from your point of view?
Michael Price. Yes, I'd just like to reiterate my concerns. As far as the codes go, like some vegetation communities, at present, you are not allowed to apply for a thinning permit, despite some of these ecosystems being reduced to thickets, actually, like the pasture has gone. 1928 surveyors describing that as a forest, open forest, well grassed, now is back to thickets of woody mass, and at present you cannot get a permit to thin those ecosystems. And I think that is absolutely vitally important that those codes be addressed so we can get some equity and better sustainable land use.
Any other comments from anyone else?
Barry Hoare, I'll just bring up the point that I made with the self-assessable codes before. From my opinion and the dealings that I've had over the last 12 or 13 years with different landholders doing PMAPs and whatever, if they are as concise as they can be possibly made, and with as small a grey areas as possible, people aren't going to push the boundaries. They're going to operate within them, because the less they have to do with the department officials to get permits or anything else, one, it's going to make their job easier. Two, it'll make it quicker, like more economic. They can get in and do something as long as it fits in the boundaries of what they're quite sure was quite safe. Three, there will be less avenues for the businesses that have been generated out of this, like the consultancy services, myself included, a few years ago. They are been skimming thousands and thousands of dollars out of landholders, and at the end of the day, for no economic benefit for the landholder, all they're doing is abiding by paperwork.
All right, thank you very much for that, Barry. Any other comments?
Angus here, could I just say in closing that, in my opinion, the legislation must be redrafted with a focus on production and the welfare of primary producers, and so restore a balance. Thank you.
Angus, can I just pick up on that point? Are you making reference to the current bill that is proposed, or just generally with regards to
the one in existence at the moment?
No, all right, thank you for that. Gentlemen, can I just, picking up on the self-assessable codes, we heard earlier evidence last week as we held other hearings. Would you, I'll put forward a statement and then I'd be keen to hear your views on it, as to the view that the industry, graziers, etc., have come to a point now, and they're have existed and operated under the current laws, that they would be better educated now with regards to self-assessable codes and would be able to hold themselves to a higher standard?
Simple answer, yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'd probably agree with that too.
All right, thank you very much.
I would agree with it also.
Thank you. Gentlemen, are there any final points that any of you would care to make? Anything that perhaps we haven't touched on that you feel is important to be brought to the committee's attention?
Peter here, Peter Barrett. There is one, and that's that area management where you're going to have people, I presume that's going to be a group of people in doing local area assessments. Is that correct?
We only look at the legislation. We don't talk about how the department will operate it. But
I see.
You put forward your concern or your issue, Peter.
Well, I would like to see those AMPs that are doing the group assessment have someone from the concerned area, like a farmer from that concern. If they're going to be working in the wet tropics, that they grab someone that's got a farm that's in the wet tropics, and even someone from the public that has an input. So it's a fair method to put across to all stakeholders. Not a group, as I've even heard some comments made about bureaucrats that sit in an office and draw up these things, and they got, they might be doing their best, but unfortunately without local knowledge. And like I just heard someone say, I think it was Angus, say the farmer knows best his own land. Well, that's a true statement too. So that's what I'd like to see, if it's all possible, that we do have, if we do have these groups, that they put local people on, and they'd be paid out as pocket expenses as well.
Sure. Okay, thank you for that, Peter. Any other comments that anyone would like to address that perhaps we haven't had an opportunity to do so far?
Oh, Barry Hall speaking. This is probably digressing a little bit from my initial point, but I think somewhere that the committee should recognise the fact that the average age of the person on the land these days is 60, I believe, which is a crying shame. I'm only 38, but...
That makes you a young whippersnapper.
As time goes on, I've seen it with my own parents. They get less and less interested in the land because it's difficult to keep up with paperwork. So the more emphasis in keeping things simple and operative, the better off it will be, because it'll give them a feeling, well, they can pass something on to the next generation with genuine ownership. And it's an issue that's being more and more lost from the bush.
Thank you for that, Barry.
Peter here, can I add to him?
Yes, please.
He is 38. I'm 65, as I've said, and I'm getting a bit long in the tooth too. But what I've noticed is, yes, the understanding and being computer illiterate and all these things, us old fellas ain't used to all that, and it becomes very hard, very stressful, and to make decisions and find out things. Might I add also that where we had opportunities to get things done, by the time we found out about some of the issues, we lost the opportunity. And yes, I agree. If we don't start changing our thoughts, who's going to take over our farms? That's what worries me. I've got 2 sons, and at the moment, if I gave them my farm, they'd probably sue me for child abuse.
I would love to put that comment into the report, but I don't think I will.
Well, I don't think so. I thought a bit of humour wouldn't go astray.
No. Any other comments from anyone else just before we wrap up?
I'd just like to thank you for at least listening to everyone's concerns.
No, that's our job. It's one of the great, I believe one of the great strengths of the committee system now is that we certainly, in my time in the Parliament, we're doing a much better job of engaging than we did previously. Can I just, a point's just been made, can I just pick up, Peter, you talked about lost opportunities not being made aware of. Is that really just a communication issue, that there was a chance for a review but you didn't find out about it till after the dates had closed?
Well, I did have that problem, and like I said, I had a mapping adjustment done early in the piece. I did get to a minister. Unfortunately, I thought I was unjustly treated. I needed a yes or no answer from that minister on the day, and I asked him if he was the boss, and he said yes, and I said, well, give me a yes or no answer so I can get on with my life and your people can devote their time to somebody else's problems. And look, it's very frustrating, and yes, that's the sort of problems, and understanding some of the jar, like I stated, remnant, non-remnant, what's regrowth is regrowth as far as I'm concerned.
All right. No, look, thanks for that.
One more point on Barry Hall thing. One more point. I forgot to mention this before, and I'm not quite sure whether the committee members, when it comes, like I spoke to an operating consultant this morning, and he's quite well known. It costs. He charges a flat rate of between $5,000 and $8,000 for a complex PMAF.
Mm-hmm.
A simple one, he charges $1,500 to $2,000. Now, while it probably doesn't sound like a lot of money, people on the land are struggling at the moment, and this is basically something for nothing. I mean, it's just a piece of paper,
no.
And it's starting to hurt.
No, thank you for that evidence there, Barry. Gentlemen, Rob and Bruce, any final things from your perspective?
Well, Rob, I'll go. Bruce Young here, member for Careful. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your time. There's certainly been some very valid points out of there, and I just want to pass on my thanks.
Final, Rob Catter here, just final question. Was there any areas where you thought, it could use, you'd like to see it go further, or some future aspirational sort of issues to do with the veg management?
Michael Price, Rob, thanks for that. Look, despite no matter how good your legislation is, if the codes aren't changed in some ecosystems at the department level, it will not bring any improvements at all for many landholders. And I'm sure the reason for your legislation changes is to make it fairer, more equitable. And so I just think that from a ministerial point of view, it needs to make sure that those code changes and that occur so that this change can flow through.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. Well, gentlemen, look, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate that, you probably had other things that you could have been doing, but the time you took out for our committee is genuinely appreciated, because we don't often have the opportunity to travel as much as we would have liked, and to get you on the phone and be able to provide this information for us assists us in our deliberations on the bill. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
The time allocated for this session has now expired, and I thank all members for their participation so far. The hearing will now adjourn till 2:15 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.